Hey guys, Jack here, and Man City have seized control of first place once again, having seen Liverpool and Arsenal drop points against Villa and Palace respectively. Big results in the title race, but the key match we're going to talk about is Arsenal versus Villa. Despite being away from home, Aston Villa picked up a massive 2-0 win against Arsenal at the Emirates that keeps them ahead of Spurs in the top race for the top four. And I thought Aston Villa played incredibly well. They were very resolute throughout the entire match. And while here on FootMob they set up in kind of a 4-2-3-1, I thought they set up in more of a 4-4-2. And that's kind of what they were stuck at. Or more of a 4-4-1-1. Because what would happen would be John McGinn and Yuri Tielemans would sit very compact in line with the back line almost. And the likes of Morgan Rogers was sitting maybe just ahead of them as kind of a 8/10, but he wasn't kind of progressed as high. And that allowed for Diaby to kind of play in behind or even onto the right, and Zaniolo play as kind of a left midfielder. And I thought he was really crucial in them winning fouls, higher up the pitch and just maintaining possession. And when we look at Arsenal, they played their typical kind of 4-3-3, which has allowed them to be very fluid in possession. And what Arteta chose to do was allow Gabriel Jesus to sit up top and really rotate with the front line. And that saw Kai Havertz drop back into midfield for the first time, I believe, in a few months. And it didn't really work out for them in a number of ways. From the offset, Arsenal just took control of the match. They looked to play possession and play with efficiency. I thought Martin Odegaard had probably one of his best matches of the season, just in terms of how he just was everywhere, linking play and just kind of looking to just play make. And it really worked for Arsenal a lot of times. And you saw with a few instances where Arsenal were able to, in both cases, they were able to push up against Villa's back line. And they were able to create a lot of chances. They were doing really well to exploit the man's space because while Digne and Konza are solid defensively, particularly Konza, they have their weaknesses. As I mentioned in the preview, Konza doesn't have the recovery pace that the likes of maybe Matty Cash does. And Luca Digne is naturally more forward thinking, and his positioning often let him down. That allowed either Ben White or Saka to kind of drift into that side. But the issue was with Arsenal, and it was throughout the rest of the match, particularly in the first, that they just couldn't convert the chances. And it was quite apparent what was happening in the first half, because besides I think one or two, like a case where I think it was Kai Havertz had a golden opportunity and Emiliano Martinez made an incredible, I think, save or double save, I can't recall. But besides that, they didn't have a really clear shot on goal. They just didn't take their chances properly. And it was quite obvious because you saw a few times where Kai Havertz was in this midfield spot here where he is, and because Villa were looking to try to exploit the high line that Arsenal were playing, obviously if they lost possession, it was typically the likes of maybe Ben White or Odegaard took the ball and played over the top, and Kai Havertz had a few good runs through on goal, but it was a case that his final ball just didn't work. It was either that he shot when he shouldn't, or he just never took control of the ball. And you just saw in the first half that they just kept pushing and pushing, but unfortunately they couldn't pick up a goal. And it wasn't just Kai Havertz who was having this issue. Gabriel Jesus, who came into the side and he looked quite bright on the ball, being able to get onto the end of it and try to create chances, but he struggled a lot to, again, same as Havertz, get that final shot away. Saka had the same problem as well, and Trossard was quite isolated out on that left-hand side. Zinchenko was drifting inward, and it just didn't give Trossard an outlet to go on the overlap. While Ben White on the other side gave Saka a bit of freedom, and he was able to kind of either drive down to the byline or cut in and try to create something. And there was a few passes that Saka put in that could have done, if someone was on the end of it, could have meant something. But unfortunately, that continued on throughout the half, and eventually they go into the half with Arsenal not able to pick up anything. And then once in the second half came around, things started to shift. And once we got into the second half, you saw Arsenal were getting a bit more desperate. I don't know whether it was a combination of that and fatigue, but Villa were starting to get a few more opportunities on the break. And if they saw the likes of Saliba and Gabriel being left on their own between Diaby and Watkins, and while they did really well in the first half, they were able to rely on Declan Rice dropping back or Ben White, who showed good defensive nous, but unfortunately it just didn't work out for them. And there was a few cases where they got a few shots on goal in the first half. They hit the woodwork, and then the second one, like they had their opportunities, and Arsenal didn't kind of shut up shop, which they probably could have, and try to play a bit more, not pragmatic, but kind of be a bit more resolute defensively, because they were committing so much going forward that they were letting a lot of space in behind. And despite even putting more players up top, pushing more players up, in the second half, Villa were a lot more shutout. And I thought John McGinn and Yuri Tielemans did incredibly well in marshalling that midfield. They looked to just kind of prevent any big spaces opening up. And that prevented Saka and Trossard to get into those half spaces. They were crucial in doing that. Obviously, Diaby, Zaniolo were defending as well, but but those two really did well to just kind of prevent Arsenal from getting really any good sniffs on goal. And that saw Arteta making a few changes, and we saw likes of Martinelli come on for Trossard, who just tried to inject some pace, and Tomiyasu in for White, and it didn't change for them. And then eventually, Martin Odegaard came off for Emile Smith-Rowe, and I think that might have been a poor decision and I understand they have Bayern Munich in the midweek, but he is so pivotal to how well they were doing. And I think seeing Leon Bailey come on then for Diaby was also a big thing, and he led to the first goal. The Arsenal were just caught off in transition, and ball across the goal, and Bailey, who did really well with his weaker foot, put into the goals, and they went the goal up. And then when Arsenal went to push, their high line was exposed once again, and the only player that was left back was Emile Smith-Rowe, who managed to get back and chase Ollie Watkins, but unfortunately Watkins is he's such a potent striker. He's second in the Golden Boot behind Erling Haaland, and he just chipped it over Dawaya. And despite Arteta throwing on the likes of Nketiah, he just tried his best. He tried to throw on more players, but unfortunately it just didn't work out. And Arsenal now lost, and they could have capitalised on this opportunity. They had the opportunity to, go first, leave Liverpool and City behind them, but unfortunately they weren't able to do that. And I think this was a reminder of how delicately poised this title race can be. And credit to Unai Emery, he had picked up a win again for the first time, in his first returns, to Arsenal since he was sacked. And you gotta admit, it was incredibly professional performance, despite the team having played in Europe during the week. He just set them up incredibly well, and they got a ball off their luck a couple of times that, Arsenal weren't able to finish their chances, but sometimes you have to get that, and you have to capitalise on those mistakes or lack of, chances that they take. And they managed to do that, winning 2-0, and they are now poised to finish in the top four and get Champions League football next season. With 6 games left in the campaign and 2 points separating City, Arsenal and Liverpool, there's still every chance about where this title will go to. Obviously, Man City are in the driver's seat now, having picked up a win against Luton. It doesn't mean that they're going to coast the rest of the season. I know that they've had a really good record now in the last few years once they get into the front seat and they kind of stay there. But we've seen how all these teams have dropped points. We've seen even City drop points, and they have had poor performances in recent weeks. So I'm not excusing anything, and I don't think it's going to be a case of one team is better off than the other. Obviously, Liverpool have had a poor week. Arsenal, unfortunately, had a poor day. But there's still, as I said, still 6 games left, and anything can happen now for the rest of the campaign. In terms of man of match performances, I'm half tempted to give it to Martin Odegaard, who, like I said, had an incredible performance as a playmaker. But to be honest, I have to give it to Diego Carlos. I haven't watched a lot of Villa this season, and I was really impressed with him. He had suffered a lot of injuries, and if you saw last year, I think it was his first or second game with Villa, he tore his ACL, and I didn't expect him to kind of come back in such a high way. Well, I haven't watched him, and I wasn't too familiar with him at Sevilla. But watching him today, he was, when Villa pushed up a high line and they obviously were caught on the break, Ezri Konsa, who played further out wide, was getting exposed through the half space. But Diego Carlos has incredible pace, and he caught up with the likes of Trossard, Jesus, Havertz, and Saka a couple of times, and he just was incredible in terms of just his recovery speed, and it allowed Villa to play this high line. And I thought, because with the various injuries that, especially with Tyrone Mings, who is a flyer as well, once he's kind of on the straight and narrow. But Diego Carlos is incredible today, and I kind of want to give him my man of match because he just was incredibly solid, and he did both sides of defending, where he was able to track back and also just be a shield and a kind of a battering ram, and prevented Arsenal from having any joy on set pieces. And granted, the delivery wasn't great, but they still just didn't have any abilities on set pieces, and maybe that is down to Unai Emery as well. But I have to give it to Diego Carlos. He's my man of match. So that's it for this tie. Let's quickly run through the rest of the Premier League. Newcastle were really impressive in this match against Tottenham, and they exploited all the weaknesses that Postecoglou's system has had. And I know likes of Van de Ven and Udogie had very poor performances, but you know, you have to take your chances, and Newcastle did incredibly well on the break. Isak and Gordon just tore the defence apart, and Postecoglou may have to consider his system and, you know, the different weaknesses that I possibly have. And obviously it could be just a bad day at the office, but that just happens sometimes. Then it was Brentford who picked up a massive win against Sheffield United, who they, like, besides Sheffield United having one or two chances, they just didn't threaten the Brentford goal that much. Credit to Brentford, who looked to play with Mikkel Damsgaard as kind of like taking pot shots from outside the box, and it really worked for them and getting really good chances. And they had a goal disallowed, and you know, that happens sometimes, but they picked up the win, and that's huge for them. Then we had Man City versus Luton, and in the first half it was quite difficult for City to break down Luton, and the own goal by Luton's centre half, the Japanese international, I can't recall his name, but my word, it was such an unfortunate own goal. And, you know, despite going, you know, I think it was 3-0, you know, 3-0 before Ross Barkley finished off well, but Man City were just comprehensive in this game. And Nottingham Forest versus Wolves being a 2-2 draw, looked like a very entertaining game, and we saw why Matheus Cunha is so important to this Wolves side. He just looked incredibly well, and his goal just taken beautifully, kind of getting past a couple of the opponents. Nottingham Forest probably be disappointed that they get something from this match, but honestly, it looked like an entertaining match, and I think a draw was probably deserved in the end. Then we have Burnley, who took the lead early on, and unfortunately for Muric made an incredibly poor error, and I think that just maybe potentially confirms their relegation. I felt really sorry for him. You know, that it was quite just a horrible incident. You know, and that happens at the top level, and I just hope, and like, I just love the fact that his team were behind him. They consoled him. The coaching staff didn't shove blame on him, and I think it should hopefully do him well, and I do hope he kind of builds up and kind of helps Burnley throughout the rest of the season and potentially in the future, because he's shown to be a very good goalkeeper this season when he's been back. Obviously the last couple of weeks have been a bit rocky for him, especially today, but you know, he's a good goalkeeper, and I do hope he does, you know, it does better for him in the future. He's, you know, it takes as a learning experience. Then we have Bournemouth and Man United, and surprise, Bournemouth probably should have won this. They went ahead twice, and Man United had to rely on Bruno Fernandes to just pull them out, you know, pull a rabbit out of a hat. Brilliant volley for the first one, and then obviously the penalty for the second. And unfortunately, Bournemouth were potentially denied a penalty towards the end of the match. But you know, I'm not going to get into the VAR controversy in this, but United do need to work on something. Looks like they're going to be out of Champions League contention. So they need to either assess what's going on with the system, with the personnel, maybe give youngsters a go. But then we have, as I said earlier, shock win from Crystal Palace. Liverpool had so many chances, and unfortunately weren't able to convert them. Credit to Palace, they were just so committed to the cause. Blocks, you know, good saves from Henderson, missed chances from Curtis Jones, but overall, just it was the first loss that Liverpool have suffered in Anfield, I think, since October 2022, I think it was. Like, that's insane. But a slip by Van Dijk almost cost him a second goal. But Eze was completely unmarked for their goal, and again, fair dues to Palace, they just were so good defensively. Then last up was West Ham Fulham, and Andreas Pereira picking up 2 goals and securing all 3 points away from home. West Ham just didn't look great at all, and during the week they struggled against Bayer Leverkusen, who I just want to say congratulate them on their Bundesliga title. Is incredible, and just fair dues to them. Just, if you saw the scenes afterwards, absolute bedlam. Florian Wirtz being lifted, you know, being carried out of the crowd and kissed as if he's the Messiah. But going back to this match, Fulham deserved to win. West Ham didn't really have many good chances, and just fair dues to Fulham. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please give it a like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take care.